All right, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. It's 1 minute past 9 o'clock. Welcome to VC Ag Today, this Thursday morning, March the 25th, 2021. Hope everyone's doing well. We're pleased to be joined this morning by Dr. Jayesh Samtani, Small Fruits Extension Specialist with Virginia Cooperative Extension. And the topic of discussion this morning is going to be preparing for strawberry harvest. So appreciate everyone being with us this morning, and hopefully you'll find this topic interesting and timely. Just a few comments I'd like to make before we get started. As always, if you could please just remain muted throughout the presentation. We'll open it up for questions and discussion at the end of Dr. Samtani's presentation. And then also, if you have questions or comments, if you could enter those into the chat window, that would be great. We'll address those at the end and give everybody an opportunity to get their questions answered this morning and hopefully set you all up for a successful strawberry harvest this spring. So without further ado, Dr. Samtani, we appreciate you being with us this morning. And if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen, we can get started.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. I'd like to welcome everyone taking the time to attend this seminar, or rather an Ag Today piece of webinar. Yeah. Do you guys see the screen okay?
Yes, Jayesh, we can see it. Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So Stephanie, when she contacted me, she was really keen that I talk about strawberry harvest, and I'd like to thank her for this opportunity. Right now, as if you think of a strawberry, as a 9-month crop, it's now in its third quarter. So it's about to enter its third quarter. So April, May, and June are going to be the key months for flowering and fruiting of this particular plant. And there are a lot of things that we need to keep in mind. And with the time that we have, we probably are not going to have time to get into too much details. But the good thing is there are plenty of resources that are already out there that are compiled and put in place by a couple of different extension sources. So it's a multi-state university effort, and we're going to kind of go through some of those during this talk with the intent that if you really need to dig down further into a particular topic, you have the resources to be able to do so. So here's going to be the overview of my talk today. So I'm going to briefly touch upon some of the newer educational resources that have been released in the past year or two that some of you may or may not be familiar, but if you aren't, this is a good place to kind of become known about it, and hopefully you'll find that to be of great use if you are a strawberry grower or an agent who works with strawberry growers. And I think this time of the year, the bigger challenge we have with this cool, moist environment is also diseases. The insects, they don't tend to bother the strawberry plant as much as some of the other small fruits. However, that could also be very site specific. But we're not going to really go into too much detail covering the different insects. I can kind of guide you to a website that would be an excellent resource if you run into an issue where you have plenty of insects and you need to address that in your field. And then Stephanie also mentioned that I should talk about leaf and petiole tissue testing. So we'll talk a little bit about that because that is very appropriate for this time of the year if you are a grower. And then some of the other things that I could think of as I was preparing this presentation. So one of the things that I find to be of great value as an extension specialist is the Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium webpage. And they have an IPM guide for strawberry production. They have one even for blackberry and blueberry if you're into other berries. But since this is a strawberry talk and I'm just kind of focusing on the strawberry aspects, there's also a production guide as well as an IPM guide up there. So if you aren't familiar with those two guides, they are good resources. The IPM guide is pretty much renewed every year. So you can, take time to go through that. What I like to do is save a copy of that on my computer, but also have a hard copy that I like to put in the chemical room. So when we are making decisions on what to put down, we have that guide ready and, handy to refer to. Amanda McWhirter at the University of Arkansas has also led this multi-state effort to discuss various topics pertaining to strawberry production. And those are very time relevant. So for example, some of you may have attended the March 18th webinar, and we had a couple of specialists from different universities, they talked about different topics. David Lockwood talked about frost protection, and then NCDA, there was a speaker from NCDA, Kristen Hicks. She talked about fertility monitoring. And then a disease specialist from Clemson talked about botrytis and anthracnose management. And then Phil Brannon from Georgia talked about botrytis and anthracnose resistance and how to sample for those. So those are also very excellent talks. So if there is a particular topic that is of interest to you, you can refer to that webinar. And we also have one that's upcoming in April, and I have put the date up here. So you may want to look at the time and confirm that the past webinars have been around the noon hour or slightly afternoon, but you may want to go to the Southern Region Small Fruit Consortium page and then check out the details on how to sign up for those webinars. And I put the link on the IPM guide just in case this presentation would be stored as a PDF at some point, and you have access to the links right in the presentation. So I borrowed a couple of slides from University of Georgia, Dr. Ali. He manages the plant molecular diagnostic lab, and he may in turn have borrowed some of these slides from Clemson University, but really the idea is to kind of help growers this time of the year, especially because if you are seeing that certain fungicides you thought would work well for botrytis, which is going to be a major disease when you have cool, moist environmental conditions and high humidity, botrytis tends to show up on the blooms and then also prominently on the fruit. So if you look at the photo of the fruit, it's also referred to as gray mold. It's got that gray fuzzy appearance, and really it comes from the nursery. So when you buy your plants, it's really important that you start off with a clean plant material. Fumigation and other soil sterilization techniques can help reduce the inoculum of botrytis in the field, but really the key source we've heard is coming from the nursery. So you really want to make sure that you have good plant material to start off, and that's really the key, I think. But if you are having a challenge trying to control botrytis in your field, you may want to look into this particular aspect of sending either your blooms or dead foliage that show botrytis symptoms on it, or even fruits. And here's the procedure where how to send it to the lab in Georgia. There is a small fee that is associated with it, so I would not really encourage you do it just like that. For example, if I don't have a hard time controlling this in my plots, so I'm not really worried about sending it to this lab. But if you are one of those growers that would like to avail this facility, especially I think because a lot of these isolates of botrytis are now showing resistance to different fungicides, you want to make sure that you get the right kind of recommendations from the lab and extension in terms of what fungicides need to be applied. And again, I think all of this is well documented in the Southern Region Small Fruit IPM guide for strawberries. So you really are encouraged to look into that if that's of concern to you. That's again for anthracnose, the procedure is more or less the same, except for anthracnose. When you are shipping your fruits, you want to make sure that you do an overnight shipment, just because if the fruits, and same for botrytis, I would say, because the fruits would get mushy if you send it in a regular shipment. So you want to send it overnight, and you want to make sure that you have a good representation of these strawberry fruits collected from different parts of your field. So you want to collect about 15 to 20 freshly collected symptomatic strawberry fruits. And you want to place each fruit individually in a plastic bag. And make sure you correctly label it outside of the bag. You have a form to fill, and that's listed on this site from Georgia. And they have some instructions on how to ship. So make sure you read through those instructions before you plan on shipping these out. And there is a small fee, as I indicated earlier. So for botrytis profiling, about 10 isolates or specimens are considered one sample, and the cost to process that is about $200 per sample. And for anthracnose, it's $100 per sample. It used to be free up until a few years, and that was under the leadership of Dr. Schnabel at Clemson University, but now there is a small fee that's associated with this particular service. And the reason why it was free earlier, because it was funded through a federal grant that ran out. Okay, so the other thing that I would like to touch upon is tissue sampling. So this time of the year, growers are going to start thinking about injecting fertilizer through the drip to kind of supplement the needs of the strawberry as it begins to produce flowers and then eventually fruit. So there's two ways or two reasons why you would tissue sample. One is you would collect a predictive sample of your leaf tissue, which is what most of the growers tend to do. But also if you run into a nutrient disorder, or if something doesn't look right in the field that may be perhaps related to nutrient deficiency or excessive nutrient application, then you need to go ahead and do a diagnostic sample of what's really going on to understand what's really going on in the plant. So routine tissue sampling is very important for high value crops like strawberry. Particularly, nutrient like boron is something that you want to watch for, or something like a nitrogen deficiency or a sulfur deficiency. So those are the key nutrients. Magnesium is another nutrient that shows up as being, deficient in a lot of fields. So those are the key nutrients that you really need to watch out for. However, there could be other nutrients that could be farm specific. So you probably are best off by starting a routine tissue sampling. And usually I send out about 2 or at most 3 samples per season, because it takes a while to collect, ship, and then get the results and then correct for the fertigation based on the recommendations. And so it takes a while for you to make that application, and then you have to give some time for the plants to adjust to those recommendations. And then you can go back, after a week or two to really understand if it has been corrected or if you need to continue making adjustments to your fertility. And these are slides from the NCDA, North Carolina Department of Agriculture, and they recommend collecting biweekly samples from early bloom through harvest. If you run into a situation where you have nutrient disorders on the plant, as soon as you notice abnormality, that's when you want to collect your tissue sample. So how to collect? And you want to collect the MRML, the most recently mature trifoliate leaf, and that's got 3 leaflets. Most of you are probably familiar with the strawberry plant here, but if you look at a leaf, it's composed of 3 leaflets and a petiole. And you want to collect about 15 to 20 such leaves on a per acre basis. And you have to separate them out by varieties. You have to separate them out if you are putting down different fertilizer dose rates in certain parts of your field. So you kind of have to keep them straight. That way, if they are at different growth stages, you have to separate them out, because that might mean that you may have to differentially apply fertilizers if it allows for you to do that, and I know at a practical scale. So typically the MRML is not the topmost leaf, and it's not really the leaf laying down and touching the plastic. It is somewhere in between that, and it needs to be a leaf that is fully developed in size and is green in color. So dark green in color. We talked about this part earlier, so you can see how in the photo they've harvested those leaves. Some of you have done that many times, but for those of you who are new to this, this is a good resource, the NCDA site. And what it does is, the petiole really helps you give a good understanding on the live status of the nitrate content. And if you only rely on the leaves, that may not be very accurate. The nitrate nitrogen is best estimated looking at the petiole. So you want to place these samples, you separate the petioles out, and then put the petioles in a different bag, and you put the leaves in a different bag, and fill in the form. The NCDA has a form. There's also one other lab, Waypoint Analytical in Virginia, that does that. But beyond that, I'm not really familiar with any other labs. NCDA and Waypoint are the two labs that I'm familiar with. And maybe there are agents in this room who may be aware of other resources. We can probably open that up for discussion if someone's really interested in knowing where to ship that out. But I've had good success shipping mine to NCDA. Not that I'm recommending them, but it's just been my personal experience. The bloom, so NCDA form has the 12 consecutive weeks that are listed. So when you ship out your samples, you have to indicate what growth stage your plant is in. So for example, week 1 of bloom to fruit is characterized by 5 to 10 open blossoms on at least 50% of the plants in the field. And then week 5 corresponds to first harvest, because a lot of us know that it takes about 4.5 to 5 weeks from the time to flower from the time to first flowering to then the time to first fruiting. This is just a snapshot of the form that's required to be submitted along with your sample. And then you have to identify the growth stage and the week, because that helps NCDA give you accurate recommendations. So you can see that the nitrate nitrogen sufficiency range depends and varies from week to week of that bloom to fruit. And based on what the lab results are, you'll get these recommendations again based on what bloom fruit stage you're in. So make sure you write the week correctly. Now, when you get to fruiting, you don't really start again from week 1. You are on week 5 when you first see the fruits. So the reason why this is important is because we already discussed this a little bit earlier. It gives you, the status of the different nutrients. And if you send your petiole samples, there's an extra cost to analyze the petioles, but it gives you a good indication of the nitrate nitrogen. They also look at the ratios to make sure that their nutrients are balanced. And if something is off, like if the nitrogen to sulfur ratio is really high, they might recommend that you apply sulfur, even though the sulfur may appear to be sufficient based on the lab results. But it could be that it is sufficient in the plant, but the ratio of the nitrogen to sulfur is off. And that's why they would recommend that they put down a sulfur application. And they do that for a few of these nutrients that you see are listed here. So this is going back to soils class 101, where if a nutrient is deficient in the plant body, the plants will exhibit deficiency symptoms. And then once you put down sufficient amount, it responds to it. It's nice and happy. It's going to give you good yield. However, if you over apply, it could result in toxicity, or it may not be very sustainable for your economics, farm economics. It could also be harmful to the environment, depending on how mobile the nutrient is in the soils. So those, I think, are things to keep in mind when you put down your fertilizers in the field. This is the sample report that you will get. So for example, if you look at nitrogen, the interpretation index is indicating L, which means that it is low. For everything else, it seems like it's sufficient. And then again, if you look at sulfur, I see L in front of sulfur. So that indicates that both nitrogen and sulfur are low. And then they recommend that you apply those fertilizers in your plots for the spring season. So I think it's really good. I found this also to be useful for boron applications. And one of the key reasons why you want to start this earlier is because you want to put down the boron when the strawberries or around peak bloom. Because if you have less boron, then one of the symptoms you're going to be seeing with lack of boron is going to be malformed or deformed fruits, and those are considered not marketable. So you want to pay attention to your boron levels. And then again, keep in mind, like anything else, this is just a tool that is used to kind of understand what's going on in the plant and how you can help the plant prosper, which in turn would help you prosper. So keep in mind that, the temperature, the rain conditions, the pH, if the plant is stressed, disease or insect is bothering it, it's going to give you a different status than when there's no insect or disease pressure on the plant. And that's why I think when you send your tissue samples, I will re-emphasize that, keep in mind that you want to separate out such issues and then send more than one sample if you see differences like that. And also fertigation, I mentioned, can influence how your plants will respond and what to the different fertilizers and what the nutrient status would be within the plant body. So you have to make sure that if you are fertigating your two plots differently, that you send two samples for tissue analysis. Okay, so other items that I would like to briefly highlight, and I looked at what Barclay Polling had put together, and with the North Carolina production manual. So that's a wonderful resource as well. One is, we are not yet through with our frost-free day. We have until mid-April where we could be hit by frost. It doesn't happen too often, but there is a likelihood that we would get hit again. So make sure your row covers are still in place, even though we are starting to warm up. And for those of you who rely on overhead irrigation, make sure that you still have it out there and you haven't taken that off. If you rely on bees for pollination, make sure that you have your hives ready by the field. You want to make sure that you're scheduled for picking. So make sure you have the labor, you worked out your sales, your stands are kind of well set up, and you have the stand people ready to be standing there as soon as the customers start to walk in. Make sure that your signs are ready for this time. And it's a good time to think about getting your signs ready. If you're a new grower, you may want to start advertising earlier. Make sure people know where your farm is, and also maybe put some information on where they could park, have some sort of a plot map ready. So that would prevent you from doing less stalking or taking a lot of phone calls. So you want to cut down on those. You kind of make your instructions nice and clear. You also will start seeing more weeds. The grass is going to begin to keep growing. So different growers, they use different strategies on how to control the ryegrass. Some of them will probably decide that that's enough growth. They're going to go ahead and kill it with a grass herbicide, and then just use that mulch as a walk, as something to walk on. That they do that in early spring. For other growers, they continue to mow right through the harvest. And then when they get close to the peak harvest is when they maybe stop mowing their lawn. So it really depends on individual growers, but you may want to think about how you're going to manage your walkways as you think about the harvest season. And also we know from our experience last year that we are still in the pandemic season. So if you haven't taken precautions, or if you haven't made your growers and farm people aware of what they're going to be doing this year, make sure you give them like a clear indicator of how you're going to function as a farm operation this coming season. Make that clear to your people. I know some people, they were still trying to, some growers were still trying to get used to the online system of payment and using like credit cards. So if you haven't worked that out, this is a good time to work those things out before your fruits start coming, and make sure your container baskets are all ordered by now and you have them coming. You make sure you've discussed your pricing with your growers in the vicinity to make sure you're staying competitive. So those are the things that you want to do for this time of the year. And then I'd just like to end by saying thanks for attending. I also have a Facebook page, and I try to put things on Twitter now, and you can follow me by looking up VT Berry Bites, and BITES stands for Business Innovation, Technology, Environment, and Science. So you look up VT Berry Bites on Facebook and Twitter, you'll see that I'm active now, posting berry stuff on social media. And we also put together a bunch of videos since we did not have the Mid-Atlantic Berry School this year. We put a few videos that we thought were again time relevant, and those are at the Hampton Roads AREC Virginia Tech YouTube page. So you'll see both field videos as well as educational presentations that are put. And the good thing was, since we were in the pandemic times, we could really invite a lot of growers even from the West Coast who otherwise would not be able to travel as freely, either due to budget constraints or either due to lack of time, but they were able to make it this time. And so we have some West Coast people also putting some of the information on this particular channel. So that's pretty much it, Stephanie, from my talking front. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. Thanks, Jayesh. We appreciate you being with us this morning and sharing all the great information and recommendations for strawberry producers going into the harvest season. I don't see any questions in the chat window, but if anybody on the call has any questions this morning, now is the time. We'll open it up for questions and discussion. So if you have questions, just if you would click the small microphone mute button in the bottom left-hand corner of the toolbar on your screen. That will allow you to unmute yourself. If you also have questions, you could always put those in the chat as well. Well, you did an excellent job, JS. We must don't have any questions for you. Stephanie, and anything that you'd like to ask or comment, from your growers there in the Northern Neck?
I guess one question that I have is, we've been sending samples to Waypoint, and is the sample submission the same type of procedure in that you remove the petioles from the trifoliate for Waypoint or not? I've always been a little bit, it's not quite clear, I don't think, on theirs.
Yeah, so the only time I used their facility was when I did sampling for blackberries, and that's when I used it. And maybe I think one of those things is, this is one of those things you may want to ask them. Maybe they kind of separate it at their end when the samples reach their facility. Personally, I feel that maybe a little bit late. It's best to detach it as you harvest it from the plant. But that's something I could, you would want to ask them before shipment. the NCDA guidelines, I would think, are pretty universal. So you may, just feel free to follow the NCDA guideline. If they tell you anything, maybe, you can let them know what they need to be doing.
All right, any other questions or comments this morning for Jayesh on his presentation for strawberries?
All right.
right.
Yeah, good luck with the strawberry season. It's coming up soon. So pretty soon, you'll be enjoying good berries.
All right, thank you, Jayesh. I apologize, everyone. They're trimming some bushes outside of our office, so I apologize for the background noise this morning. But as always, thank you, Jayesh. Appreciate your time to be
You're
with us and share those updates this morning.
Yeah, I couldn't hear any background noise, if that makes you feel better.
Also, I'd just like to take an opportunity as well to thank the team of agents that make this effort possible every week. Stephanie Romelchek, Laura Maxine, Trent Jones, Mike Broadus, and Frank Long. You see those there on your screen. This meeting has been recorded, so you see the link there for the recording. You can access this week's VC Ag Today as well as all previous sessions. If you need that link, please contact one of your local agents. And then finally, you will see on your screen there an evaluation link to evaluate the program this morning. If you want to share some comments, feedback, we'd really appreciate that, as well as if you have ideas for future topics. So we have transitioned to a bi-weekly program. So we probably will not have a VC Ag Today next Thursday, but the following Thursday will be our next event for that. So we will continue to send out information to folks regarding upcoming topics. The next topic will be Thursday, April the 8th at 9 a.m. You see that there on your screen. We're going to be talking about corn planting considerations. So as folks get geared up to go to the cornfields to plant, we're going to have Dr. Wade Thomas, our extension grain specialist, join us and provide some updates and considerations for corn planting season. So please share that opportunity with folks that would be interested. So thank you all again. Appreciate it, Jayesh, and hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday.
Thank you.